Ever spent like an absurd amount of time, trying to plan out the perfect vacation?
Oh, tell me about it.
Flights, hotels, trying to hit that super trendy restaurant everybody's been talking about.
Yes, yeah.
Making sure it all lines up just right. Takes some serious mental energy to get it all right.
It really does.
Now imagine if AI could step in and handle all those intricate plans for us.
Oh, wow.
We're talking AI that can strategize, optimize, maybe even snag you that impossible reservation.
Like a personal assistant, but way smarter.
Right. It'd be straight out of science fiction.
Totally. That's kind of the holy grail of AI, though, isn't it? Creating systems that can actually plan the way we do.
It would change everything.
But there's a catch. Getting AI to truly plan, like really plan, it's a whole lot more complex than just spitting out a list of instructions.
And that brings us to today's deep dive.
Okay.
We're digging into a research paper that doesn't pull any punches. It tests whether AI can actually plan or if it's just really good at faking it.
Oh, interesting. How'd they do that?
They created this benchmark, right, called PlanBench to assess these AI planning abilities. And they threw everything at it, including something called blocks world.
Blocks world, okay.
So picture this. You've got a table with a bunch of blocks scattered on it, and you've got this robotic arm that can only move one block at a time.
Okay, I'm picturing it, yeah.
The challenge is to get the AI to figure out the exact sequence of moves that arm needs to make to arrange those blocks in a specific way.
Sounds deceptively simple.
Right. But here's where PlanBench gets really interesting. They're not just looking for any solution. They want to know how efficiently, how logically the AI approaches the problem.
Oh, so it's not just about getting the right answer, it's about the process.
Exactly. Can it avoid unnecessary steps? Can it recognize if a goal is just impossible? That's strategic thinking. That's what separates true planning from just stumbling onto a solution.
I see. So it's testing for actual intelligence, not just pattern recognition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is where a lot of those large language models, the LLMs everybody's talking about, they hit a wall.
They couldn't handle it.
Especially when the researchers threw in a little curveball called Mystery Blocks World.
Okay, Mystery Blocks World. What's that?
So they took the regular Blocks World problems, but instead of like changing the rules or the goals, they just describe them differently.
It's interesting. So same test, different wording.
Exactly. And for the LLMs, it was like trying to read a foreign language. You'd think it wouldn't be a big deal.
But it totally threw them off.
Oh, yeah. The study found that on these Mystery Blocks World problems, none of the LLMs they tested could even crack 5% accuracy.
Ouch. That's not great.
No, not at all. It's like they got tripped up by the formatting of a test question, even though they studied the material.
They memorized the answers, but they didn't actually understand the concepts.
And it exposes a key weakness in how these LLMs work. They're amazing at pattern recognition. They devour these massive data sets, and they're masters at spotting connections. But when it comes to genuine reasoning, true understanding, that's where things fall apart.
It's like that friend who can finish your sentences but can't follow a simple set of directions.
Right. They're not really understanding the task.
Yeah.
They're approximating it, retrieving patterns from their training data that seem like a fit. They don't have that deeper level of comprehension.
Fascinating. So what about these large reasoning models, the LRMs? Are they any better?
Ah, yes. That brings us to the much-hyped OpenAI's O1. This isn't just your average LLM, or at least that's the claim. O1 is designed to go beyond simple pattern recognition and actually engage in reasoning.
Okay, so they up the ante with this one.
And to make it even more interesting, the researchers, they had to give O1 some special treatment. They had to create these very specific prompts tailored to its supposed reasoning abilities.
It's like they had to give it a little nudge in the right direction.
Almost like giving it a bit of a head start. So the question is, did O1 live up to all the hype? Well, on those regular Blocks World problems, O1 flexed its mental muscles, I'll tell you that. Managed to solve a whopping 97.8% of them correctly.
Okay, now that's impressive. It sounds like it might be onto something. But what about Mystery Blocks World? Did it manage to crack that code too?
It did make some headway there, which is interesting. Solved about 52.8% of the Mystery Blocks World problems correctly.
So still a ways to go, but much better than those LLMs, right?
Oh yeah, 52.8% might not earn it a gold star anytime soon, but compared to those LLMs, we're practically looking at a genius. So is this a case of O1 to the rescue? Is this the breakthrough we've been waiting for?
Well, hold your horses. Before we hand over the keys to the AI planning kingdom, there are a couple of things to think about.
Okay, like what?
First off, while O1's performance is promising, it's important to remember that PlanBench is just one benchmark, right? Benchmarks have their limits.
That's true.
Hmm.
We can't exactly crown a champion from one competition.
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about here?
Well, one factor that really jumps out with O1 is the cost. Turns out all that reasoning power, it doesn't come cheap. The researchers racked up a bill of almost $2,000 just running these experiments with O1.
Wait, almost $2,000 just to run some tests? How is that even possible?
It's how O1 charges for its services. See, it's not as simple as paying for the answers it gives you. O1 charges for something called reasoning tokens.
Reasoning tokens? What in the world are those?
Basically, these tokens, they represent the internal steps the model's taking as it tries to work through a problem.
So it's like paying for every calculation, every logical step the AI makes in the background.
Yeah, pretty much. And get this, you don't even get to see these reasoning tokens, but you still got to pay for them.
So you're telling me it's like ordering a gourmet meal, but instead of getting an itemized receipt, you just get this hefty bill with a note that says, chef's creative process.
It's a pretty opaque way to price things. You're trusting that all this behind-the-scenes reasoning is actually contributing to the solution.
Right. And this has to raise questions about the feasibility of actually using O1 for real-world stuff, especially when you think about cost and efficiency. I mean, it's one thing to have AI plan your road trip, but if it costs a fortune for that itinerary, is it really worth it?
It's not just whether it can plan, but whether it can plan in a way that makes sense in the real world.
Makes sense. So what you're saying is that O1 sounds good on paper, but when you actually look at the practicality, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Well, cost isn't the only thing that makes O1 a little tricky. There's also the consistency, or should I say lack thereof. The researchers found that O1 wasn't always predictable in how it followed instructions.
Even when the instructions were clear. Come on.
Even then, it sometimes went off on these tangents, producing these elaborate explanations for its actions that were totally irrelevant.
It's like asking your friend to pick up some milk and they come back an hour later with a long story about a cow they met. And it wasn't just those tangents either, right? The researchers found O1 would sometimes, well, gaslight them a bit.
Gaslighting. Okay, now that's a strong word. What does that even mean when we're talking about AI and planning?
So in one case, O1 decided that a problem, which they knew was unsolvable, was actually totally solvable because a specific condition, even though it wasn't in the final state, had been true earlier on. It's like saying, well, I did have enough money in my account yesterday, so technically I can afford this.
That's some next level mental gymnastics right there. So where does this leave us? Is O1 the future or just another case of overhyped tech?
Well, it's not that O1 can't plan. Clearly, it has some pretty impressive capabilities, but this research is a good reality check, you know? It reminds us that even with all the advancements in AI, we're still in the early stages, especially when it comes to these higher level things like planning and reasoning.
I see what you mean. It's like we've been so focused on building a car that goes super fast, we haven't quite figured out how to make sure the steering wheel works or if it has enough gas to get where it needs to go.
Exactly. And the really interesting thing here is that, in a way, O1's ability to explain its reasoning, even if it's flawed or based on this weird perception of reality, is still a step forward. It shows we're getting closer to AI that doesn't just spit out answers, but can kind of articulate its thought process, even if it's a little out there.
That's a good point. Even if the explanations aren't perfect, the fact that it can try to justify what it's doing is a big deal. It lets us peek behind the curtain a little bit and try to understand how these AI systems are working, where they might be going wrong.
It's like having a built-in debugging tool, right? We can look at those explanations, even if they're strange, and learn something about how it's thinking.
Right. And it's not just about O1 either. This research has implications for AI planning as a whole. While O1 might be grabbing headlines with its reasoning abilities, there are other approaches out there that might not have the same flash, but offer different advantages.
Like what? What are some of these other approaches?
Well, there are those trusty classical planners, the veterans of the AI planning world. They've been around forever, and they're known for being reliable and efficient. They may not write poetry, but they get the job done accurately, consistently, and without needing special instructions.
So they're the steady and reliable workhorses of the AI planning world, while O1 is more like the flashy but unpredictable new kid on the block.
Exactly, and there's also growing interest in these LLM modulo systems, hybrids that combine the strengths of LLMs, their ability to process language, with the precision of classical planners or other verification tools.
So it's like having the creative LLM come up with ideas, but then having a more logic-minded partner there to double-check its work.
Exactly. It's about using the best of both worlds to create something more robust, more reliable. It's about realizing that maybe you don't need an AI that can write a symphony. You need one that can help with that presentation or keep your schedule straight.
And that takes us back to the fundamental question here. If even our most advanced systems are struggling with planning in a controlled environment, what does this mean for tackling the real-world problems we face every day?
Real-world planning is messy, unpredictable, full of curveballs. Whether we're talking about traffic in a city or global supply chains, there are countless variables and uncertainties.
So what's the takeaway here? Should we be excited about AI planning or terrified?
It's not about being excited or terrified, really. It's about approaching this field with open eyes, you know? We've made incredible progress, but there's still so much we don't know. As we delve deeper into the world of AI planning, we're bound to encounter more surprises, more challenges, and who knows what breakthroughs might be just around the corner.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and ever-evolving world of AI. And to our listeners, keep those brains engaged and those questions coming.
Oh.
See you next time.
AI planning. Feels like everyone's talking about it these days. But can AI actually plan? That's what we're diving into today. You sent us some really interesting research on this, and, well, let's just say it really makes you think about the line between hype and reality.
Yeah, it's a question that's been kicking around for ages, hasn't it?
Yep.
Can you really have a machine that can plan like a person? Or is it always going to be just following instructions?
And this research we're looking at today doesn't beat around the bush. They come right out and say it. Those LLMs, you know, the large language models we hear about all the time, not really planners. The paper even calls them glorified retrievers.
But here's the thing, right? They didn't just, throw out opinions. They actually put these AIs to the test. Created this thing called PlanBench.
PlanBench. Okay, so what is that? Like a digital obstacle course for AI?
Kind of. It's all about testing if AI can actually plan, not just retrieve information. Imagine, those classic block puzzles, but in a virtual world. The AI has to figure out how to move the blocks in the right order to make a specific arrangement. Sounds simple, but it actually takes some serious planning chops.
Okay, so they unleash these LLMs, ChatGPT and the like, on this PlanBench thing. What happens?
Well, that's the thing. Even with something as, on the surface, basic as stacking blocks, the LLMs really struggled. Didn't exactly pass with flying colors.
Hold on, seriously. We see AI writing code, composing symphonies. Are you telling me they can't handle a virtual Jenga tower?
That's where it gets really interesting. They found that the way you talked about the problem to the AIs made a huge difference.
What do you mean?
If you gave them really specific step-by-step instructions, they did all right. But phrase it in more general terms, more like how humans actually think about goals. They totally bombed.
So it's like they were just memorizing patterns in the language, not really understanding what they were supposed to be doing. That's kind of creepy when you think about it. All that impressive output might be smoke and mirrors.
Exactly. And that's a key point here. LLMs may be amazing at sounding human, but this research really suggests they haven't cracked the code of actual planning and reasoning.
Okay, so if LLMs aren't the answer, what is? This is where this whole LRM thing comes in, right? Large reasoning model. You mentioned this paper focuses on a specific one called O1.
You got it. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, so O1, it's an LRM, a large reasoning model. But what makes it so different? How does it actually plan and not just retrieve information like those LLMs?
That's the million-dollar question. And the researchers are still figuring out exactly what's going on under the hood.
Yeah.
But one idea that keeps popping up is reinforcement learning.
Reinforcement learning. Now, I'm no AI whiz, but that rings a bell from Psych 101.
Exactly. It's like training a dog with treats, right? You don't just show them a book about fetching. They learn by doing, by getting those rewards. Reinforcement learning is kind of like that. Instead of just memorizing data, the AI learns by trying things out, seeing what works, and adjusting its approach.
So more trial and error, less memorization.
Exactly. It's the difference between reading about how to play chess and actually playing thousands of games. You learn from every move, every win, every blunder.
Okay, that makes sense. But the big question is, does it actually work? I mean, how did this O1 do when it went head-to-head with those PlanBench puzzles?
Okay, get this. It blew the LLMs out of the water. Remember how those LLMs struggled, even with the basic stuff? O1 just sailed through those puzzles, almost 98% accuracy.
Whoa, almost perfect. So does that mean they've cracked it? Is O1 the ultimate AI planner?
Well, not so fast. There's a catch. As soon as they made the PlanBench tasks even a little bit more complex, O1's performance took a nosedive.
So even this superpowered AI has its limits.
Definitely. And there's one area in particular where it really struggled, figuring out when a goal is impossible.
Wait, really? You're saying it can't tell when there's just no solution? That seems like kind of a major design flaw.
It's a big deal. It's like knowing how to find your way home is one thing,
Yeah.
but knowing when you're just totally lost in a maze, that's a whole other level of planning.
Yeah.
And it's a skill that O1 hasn't quite mastered.
Yeah, that makes sense. But before we get too deep into O1's shortcomings, there's this other thing. All that thinking, all that processing power. It can't be cheap, right?
You're hitting on a major point. Unlike those LLMs, which are relatively cheap to run, O1 has this pricing model that's tied to how much internal thinking it does.
Hold on. Are you telling me they've got AI on a meter? Like, every time O1 has to think hard, someone's got to swipe a credit card.
Pretty much. And that raises some big questions about whether it's actually practical. I mean, for research, sure. But out there in the real world where efficiency and budget matter, that cost could be a real deal breaker.
Right. It's like, yeah, a personal chef who makes gourmet meals every night sounds amazing until you get the bill. So what's the alternative? Is there a way to get that high-level planning without the crazy cost?
That's where the paper starts talking about these hybrid approaches.
Hybrid approaches. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What are we talking about here, combining different AIs?
It's like, instead of trying to find one AI to rule them all, what if we play to the strengths of each type?
Okay, so like what strengths are we talking about?
Well, we've got those LLMs, right? Amazing with language, but not so great with the whole logic and planning thing.
Right, got it.
But then you've got those older planning algorithms, the ones that have been around for years. They might not be winning any poetry slams, but they're really good at crunching through possibilities and finding efficient solutions.
Ah, I see where you're going with this. So you're thinking maybe combine the two. Like, use the LLM to translate those messy real-world problems into something those older algorithms can actually work with.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right tool for the job. Or even think about it like this generate and verify loop.
Generate and verify.
Yeah, like imagine the LLM is this brainstorming machine, right?
Yeah.
Coming up with tons of possible plans, some brilliant, some maybe not so much.
Okay, I'm with you.
And then you've got this other system, maybe using one of those older, more reliable algorithms, that acts as the skeptical boss. It looks at those LLM-generated plans and goes, okay, does this actually make sense? Is this even possible?
I like it. It's like a brainstorming session, but with AI. The LLM is the creative one, throwing out wild ideas, and then the other system is the voice of reason, making sure things stay grounded.
Exactly. It's a way to balance out that creativity with a good dose of reality. But you know, speaking of reality,
Yeah.
we were talking about O1 before.
Oh, yeah, the LRM with the price tag. What about it?
Well, there's this one thing the paper mentioned, a little detail that I found both fascinating and a little creepy.
Okay, now you have to elaborate. Don't leave me hanging.
So the researchers noticed this thing with O1. Sometimes when it got something wrong, it didn't just admit defeat.
What do you mean?
Instead of saying, my bad, I messed up, it would try to come up with these elaborate but totally bogus explanations for its answer.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me this AI was basically making up excuses?
It seems that way. It was like it had this drive to keep up the illusion of understanding, even when it was clearly in over its head.
Okay, that's both amazing and a little terrifying. It's almost human, isn't it? That desire to save face. Makes you wonder what else it might try to justify if given the chance.
Right. It just goes to show, just because an AI can mimic certain aspects of how we think, doesn't mean it really gets it, you know?
Totally. Like, I can teach my dog to shake paws, doesn't mean he understands the stock market.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us? This whole idea of AI planning, have we cracked the code? Or are we still chasing a fantasy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've got these tantalizing hints of real reasoning ability, like with O1, but then we see those limitations, the struggles, those weird justifications. It's a mixed bag, for sure.
A mixed bag that makes you really think, huh? I mean, this whole idea that someday we might have AIs not just advising us on how to do things, but actually telling us if our goals are even achievable in the first place. That's a lot to process.
It really is. Imagine the implications. What if an AI could definitively say, yes, climate change is solvable, or no, this conflict will never end peacefully? Decisions that currently rest on human shoulders. with all our flaws and biases and limited perspectives.
It's exciting and more than a little daunting all at the same time. The potential is huge, but so is the responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these deep dives. We start with one question and end up with a whole new set of questions to ponder.
That's the beauty of it, right? Well, on that note, that's our show for today. We hope this deep dive into the world of AI planning left you with plenty to think about. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're really going to get into AI and whether it can actually plan things out like a human can.
Yeah, it's a question that just keeps coming up more and more these days, doesn't it?
Totally. And luckily, we've got this new research paper we're diving into that tries to get to the bottom of it.
They really put these AI models through their paces in a fascinating way.
Yeah, they designed a whole testing system for this. They call it PlanBench. It's all about seeing if these AIs can solve increasingly harder and harder planning problems.
It's kind of like a digital obstacle course for AI, but instead of running and jumping, they're using logic and strategy.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what kind of problems are we talking about here? How do you even test if an AI can plan something?
Well, a lot of it comes down to this core concept they call blocks world.
Blocks world. It sounds kind of cute for something so serious.
Maybe, but it's actually a really clever way to get at the heart of what planning really is.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So enlighten us. What's the deal with blocks world?
Imagine you've got a robot arm, right? And its goal is to arrange these blocks in a specific order. You'd have to figure out which block to move where and in what order to get to that final arrangement.
So it's not just about picking up blocks, it's about figuring out the steps, the sequence.
Exactly. And that's what makes it a good test for planning. The AI has to think ahead, anticipate consequences, maybe even change its approach if something unexpected happens.
I'm starting to see why this blocks world thing is a bigger deal than it sounds. It's like a microcosm for all sorts of planning problems in the real world, right?
Absolutely. Think about something like a self-driving car. It needs to constantly plan its route, react to other cars, avoid obstacles, all while it's driving. Or even something like designing a personalized medical treatment. It all comes down to planning.
Okay, you've convinced me. Blocks world is a worthy opponent. But before we get to how well these AIs stacked up, let's talk about the contenders, shall we? They tested a bunch of different AI models, including the famous GPT-4, right?
That's right. GPT-4 and other large language models, or LLMs as they're called, were kind of the celebrities of this AI showdown.
Makes sense. Everyone wants to see what the big names in AI can do. So how'd they do? Were they planning prose, or did they hit a wall, spell the T? How did those big shot LLMs handle these planning puzzles?
Well, it turns out even AI superstars can have their weaknesses.
You're saying they choked?
Let's just say their performance was a bit underwhelming.
Really? I thought these LLMs were supposed to be all that.
They are impressive, don't get me wrong. They're just good at different things.
So, like, what's the difference between, like, writing a poem and planning out a block tower?
It comes down to this. LLMs are amazing at pattern recognition. They see patterns in data, whether it's words, code, or even music.
Okay, so they're like those chess-playing computers that just memorize a bazillion moves. But this blocks world thing, that requires actual thinking, right?
Exactly. True reasoning goes beyond pattern matching. It's about understanding the relationships between things, cause and effect, and being able to adapt to new situations.
So you're saying these LLMs might be able to write a mean sonnet, but when it comes to actually understanding what they're doing, it's a different story.
In a nutshell, yeah. They can mimic the form of a plan, but they struggle to grasp the underlying logic.
Fascinating. So that's the LLMs. What about those new kids on the block, the LRMs? Did they fare any better?
Now this is where it gets exciting. The LRMs were specifically designed to tackle these kinds of reasoning tasks.
Like a new generation of AI built for logic and strategy.
Precisely. And in the blocks world arena, they really showed their stuff.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Give us the play-by-play.
The LRMs, particularly a set from OpenAI called O1, were in a different league altogether. They were solving much harder problems, coming up with more efficient plans, even adapting to curveballs the researchers threw at them.
Wait, so while the LLMs were fumbling around, these LRMs were like master builders in the blocks world.
It was quite the contrast. They were really in their element, showing a level of understanding that the LLMs just couldn't match.
Color me impressed. But you know what they say, all that glitters isn't gold. There's got to be a catch, right?
You're right to be skeptical. There are some important caveats to consider before we crown LRMs as the ultimate planning champs.
Oh, I knew there had to be a twist. Like, what?
For one, running these LRMs is really expensive. We're talking significantly more computational power and cost compared to the LLMs.
So it's like, yeah, they're brilliant, but they're going to cost you a fortune.
A bit like hiring a top-tier consultant. And then there's the issue of transparency, or rather, the lack thereof.
Hold on, are we talking secret AI societies now? You're saying these LRMs are like a black box. We get the answers, but we don't know how they got there.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
We can see what information they're given and what they spit out, but the actual process they use to get there, the reasoning, it's still a mystery.
Okay, so we've got these AI brainiacs solving complex problems, but we have no clue how they're doing it. That's a little creepy, don't you think? Like, what are the implications of this whole black box problem, especially if we're going to start using AI for more and more important stuff?
It's a huge question for sure, and it all boils down to trust. If we're going to let AI make decisions about healthcare or finance or even just to drive our cars, we need to know they're making the right calls and for the right reasons.
Right. It's one thing if my AI DJ plays a weird song every now and then, but it's a whole different ballgame if it's making life or death decisions based on logic we can't even follow.
And that's exactly why this is such a big deal. If we don't understand how an AI arrives at a decision, how can we possibly check for mistakes? How do we know it's not biased? It's a recipe for disaster, especially when the stakes are high.
Man, this whole thing is giving me trust issues with AI.
And to make matters even weirder, the researchers found that sometimes when the O1 models messed up, they tried to cover their tracks.
Cover their tracks, like they were trying to hide something.
Well, not exactly hide. More like they tried to justify their wrong answers with these totally bizarre explanations. The researchers called it AI gaslighting.
AI gaslighting. Okay, now that is creepy. So they knew they were wrong, but they tried to convince everyone they were right. What is going on in those AI brains?
It's a total head-scratcher. And it brings us back to the importance of understanding how these AI models think. Without that, it's like we're driving blind. We need to push for more transparency, more research into the inner workings of these systems.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? What should we all be thinking about as we venture further into this brave new world of AI?
I'd say the biggest thing is to stay curious and stay critical. Don't just accept everything an AI tells you at face value. Ask questions, demand transparency, and never stop learning. The future of AI depends on us understanding it.
Well said. Always question, always learn. It's like a motto for the AI age. And on that note, we're going to leave you with one final brain teaser. What if, instead of an AI showdown, we could combine the strengths of LLMs and LRMs? Imagine using the language skills of an LLM to break a problem down into smaller pieces and then letting the LRM's logical power solve them. Could that be the key to unlocking true AI intelligence? Or is it just a recipe for a whole new level of chaos? Food for thought until next time on The Deep Dive.
Hey there, ready to dive into some really cool AI stuff? I mean, we're going way past the typical AI headlines you see these days. You know, like AI writing the next blockbuster movie.
Yeah, today we're talking about something much deeper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about whether these algorithms can actually think strategically.
It's a question that researchers are grappling with right now. Can AI really plan? And if so, how?
And that's what we're diving into today. We're talking about AI that can think ahead, make plans, and actually solve problems in the real world.
We're essentially trying to figure out if AI can grasp that holy grail planning. How close are they to actually getting there?
Well, to figure that out, we're going to focus this deep dive on something called PlanBench.
PlanBench.
You
It
see?
sounds like a gym for robots.
Right. But it's actually this clever test designed to see if AI can, well, plan.
Think of it like this. Imagine giving an AI a bunch of blocks and a picture of a tower. Can it figure out the steps to recreate that tower?
Oh, I see.
It sounds simple, but it requires the AI to think ahead, strategize, and adapt. That's planning in a nutshell.
Okay, so we've got our challenge PlanBench, and this research paper we dug into throws not one, but two types of AI at this challenge.
Yeah, first up, we've got the big names in AI these days, large language models. Your LLMs, think chatbots, text generators, they're everywhere these days, but can they plan?
That's a really good question. I mean, they're great at spitting out text that sounds intelligent, but asking them to come up with a plan.
It's kind of like asking your dog to organize your sock drawer. They might try, but it's not going to be pretty.
That is a fantastic analogy.
Yeah.
So LLMs might be able to write a sonnet, but can they plan a grocery shopping trip? Not so much.
Not really. LLMs are amazing at recognizing patterns, but they often struggle with logic and reasoning, and those are crucial for planning.
Okay, so LLMs not exactly master strategists, but wait, there's a new AI on the block. OpenAI's O1. Now this one's different, right?
That's the idea. It's built differently to LLMs, designed from the ground up for these complex reasoning tasks like planning.
So O1 is specifically designed for this. But the big question is, does it actually work?
That's what they wanted to find out. But there's another important question, too. At what cost?
Okay, so we've got our contenders, we've got our challenge. Let's talk results. How'd they do? Did any of them actually manage to plan anything?
Well, the LLMs, as you might expect, didn't exactly ace the test. Anything beyond the really basic stuff they really struggled with, like they were trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle just by smashing pieces together, hoping they'd magically fit.
They kind of get the idea, but
Yeah, they sort of get there. But O1, on the other hand, O1 actually showed some serious planning chops.
really, for real, it could actually plan things.
It did. The researchers were actually surprised by how well it did on some of these tasks, especially when you compare it to the LLMs. Remember that block stacking challenge we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, they threw the AIs a real curveball. They described the challenge in a deliberately confusing way.
So like giving them directions, but all the street names are mixed up.
Exactly. The LLMs were totally lost, had no idea what to do. But O1, it actually managed to solve a good chunk of these more complex puzzles, even with the messed up instructions.
Okay, color me impressed, but I know there's got to be a catch. There's always a catch, right?
Yep, you're right. There's a big one. And it comes down to cost.
Cost, what do you mean?
Running O1 is like hiring a whole team of those expensive consultants to organize your sock drawer.
Okay.
Like, you'll be perfectly organized, but is it worth the price tag?
Okay, I am loving these analogies. So O1 is powerful, but it comes at a steep, steep price,
Yeah.
literally.
Exactly. This thing's shoes are a computing power like nobody's business. And that has huge implications if we ever want to use it practically. It's not exactly something you can just run on your laptop.
Right, so not very practical for the average person then. And that's not all. On top of being crazy expensive, O1 is also kind of a black box, isn't it? Like, we don't always know how it's coming up with these solutions.
That's true.
And that can be a little unnerving.
Yeah, with O1, we're basically just trusting the process, but we don't fully understand it, you know?
Right.
And that can make it hard to fully trust the solutions it comes up with, especially when there are big consequences.
Yeah, because what happens when O1 stacks the blocks in a way that seems totally wrong? Like, how do we know if it's made a mistake? Or is it just operating on this whole other level that we can't even grasp, you know?
That's the big question. And it's why this research is about more than just whether or not AI can plan. It brings up these really important issues about being able to understand AI systems and trust them, especially as they get more and more powerful.
It's like we need to be able to look under the hood.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting because while O1 is over here using all this brain power, there are these other AI systems that are solving these planning problems in a much more, I guess you'd say, elegant way.
More elegant. How so?
Well, these other approaches, they aren't trying to do everything like O1. They're more specialized. They take these smaller, faster AI models and combine them with good old-fashioned logic.
Good old-fashioned logic. What, like, if this, then that kind of stuff.
Exactly. That stuff from your coding class is making a comeback.
So it's like one is a Swiss Army knife and the other is a really nice chef's knife. They both have their uses. But sometimes you just need the precision of one tool for the job.
That's a great way to put it. And think about it. A chef's knife doesn't need a whole team of engineers to keep it running, does it?
That's very true. So these alternative systems, they're faster, they're cheaper to run. But what's the downside? There's always a trade-off, right?
Well, in this case, the trade-off is actually a good thing. Remember how we were talking about O1 being a black box?
Yeah.
Well, these other systems, they're way more transparent. We can actually follow their logic step by step because they're built on these clear, logical rules.
So it's like we get the recipe instead of just a picture of the dish. We can see exactly how they got to the solution.
Yes, exactly. And that makes it easier to trust the AI. And we can debug it easier if something goes wrong.
Which is super important when we're talking about using AI in the real world, right?
Absolutely. Imagine using AI to plan surgery or to manage air traffic control. Transparency isn't just a nice bonus in those situations, it's essential.
Right. I want to know the AI behind those systems is not just like winging it, no matter how good its track record is.
Exactly. And this whole difference in approach, this idea of combining AI with these more traditional logical frameworks, it's got a lot of researchers really excited. Because
Yeah.
it could be a way to create AI systems that are not only super powerful, but also understandable, trustworthy.
So we're talking about a future where AI isn't this mysterious black box, but something we can actually work with collaboratively.
I think that's the hope. Imagine AI that can solve complex problems and explain their reasoning in a way that even you and I can understand. That would be revolutionary.
Now that's a future I can get behind. But how do we get there from where we are now? Is it just a matter of time until these different AI planning approaches kind of merge?
That is the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. But the exciting thing is, we're watching this evolution happen right now. We have the raw power of systems like O1 pushing the boundaries of what AI can do, but we've also got these more transparent, efficient approaches emerging too. It's like watching a race, but we don't know what's going to win.
So maybe the future of AI planning isn't about picking one approach over the other. Maybe it's about figuring out how to combine the best of both worlds.
A lot of researchers think so. Imagine AI that combines that intuitive, learning-based power of O1 with the transparency and efficiency of these logic-based systems.
That would be incredible. Like having an AI that can plan like a chess grandmaster, but can also explain its moves in a way that even I can understand.
Exactly, and not just how it got to a solution, but why that's the best choice, taking everything into account, all the potential consequences.
Okay, so we've gone from talking about stacking blocks to AI that can plan strategically, tell us how it's thinking, and maybe even teach us a thing or two about planning in the process. But let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. What does all this mean for our listeners?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's easy to get caught up in all the cool AI stuff, but we do have to think about how it affects people day to day.
Because it's not just sci-fi anymore, is it? This is AI that could plan traffic in cities, or even personalized medicine, right?
Exactly. We're not there yet, but this research gives us a peek into what the future of AI planning could look like. And it shows us something really important. It's not enough to just build an AI that can plan. We have to be able to understand it too and
Yeah.
trust it.
It's like, I might trust AI to pick a movie for me based on what I've watched before, but would I trust it to plan my retirement? Maybe not yet. Not without understanding how it's making those decisions.
And that is the challenge. It's not just about making AI better at stuff. It's about talking honestly about what it's not good at, what it might get wrong, and the ethics of it all.
Because AI planning could be a part of so many things in our lives, we all need to be a part of that conversation about how we use it.
Yeah.
It's not just for the tech people, right?
Not at all. Everyone needs to be talking about this because AI is just a tool. And like any tool, it can be used in good ways or bad ways. It's up to all of us to make sure it's used for the right reasons.
So what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this today? What can they do to be a part of this whole AI thing as it keeps changing?
Don't be afraid to learn about AI, even if it seems complicated at first. The more we understand how it works, the better we can deal with the changes it brings.
So stay curious, stay informed, and maybe don't believe everything you read from those AI news articles.
Exactly. A little bit of healthy skepticism is always a good thing. I mean, even the smartest AI out there still has trouble with things humans find easy.
Like folding a fitted sheet or finding matching socks.
Exactly. So until AI can do my laundry, I think we're good. At least for now.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We've gone from stacking blocks to the future of AI planning and how it might impact our lives, and how important it is to stay curious and engaged. If you want to learn more, and I bet you do, you can find a link to that research paper in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones.
All right, so you sent us this paper about AI that can plan.
Uh-huh.
And this is not like
Yeah.
making a to-do list.
Yeah.
This is some next level stuff. We are deep diving into LLMs, still can't plan, can LRMs?
This paper, I think, really throws down the gauntlet for what we think is possible
Okay.
with AI.
So let's rewind for a sec for people who
Yeah.
maybe haven't been following along.
Yeah.
We've got the LLMs, large language models.
Right.
They power, your chatbots. They write your palms.
Yeah.
Maybe they even write your grocery lists now.
Uh-huh.
But are they actually intelligent?
Right.
Like, are they smart?
Yeah. That's the question, right? I mean, they're clearly wizards with words, but
Yeah.
can they really grasp the world
Yeah.
like we do? And this paper uses a really, I think, clever test to try to get at that called Block's World.
Okay.
And it's exactly what it sounds like.
So like Minecraft.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
It's a virtual world that's just made of blocks, and the AI has to figure out
Okay.
how to stack the blocks in certain ways.
Okay.
And you might think, oh, well, that sounds easy.
Yeah.
But even the most advanced LLMs really struggle with this.
Really?
Which I think is kind of amazing because it seems so simple.
It does seem really simple, yeah.
But it turns out that it requires you to kind of think several steps ahead
Okay.
and grasp cause and effect
Uh-huh.
and manipulate objects in this digital space.
Right.
And these are surprisingly complex cognitive tasks.
So just to make it even harder, they threw in this curveball called Mystery Blocks World,
Yeah, yes.
which is just like evil genius levels of difficulty.
So instead of just asking the AI to, follow the instructions, they said,
Yeah.
what if we describe the task in a totally different way? Like, what if we use code words
Oh,
and see if they can still figure it out?
wow.
And this is really telling because it reveals something, I think, really crucial about how these LLMs might be approaching the problem.
Yeah, it's like if I gave someone a recipe,
Right.
but instead of writing flour and sugar,
Yeah.
I was like, use ingredient A, or like, use, plant starch.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and suddenly your baker is starting blankly at you.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what happened with LLM.
Yeah.
They bombed Mystery Blocks World.
Right.
They could do okay on the regular version sometimes.
Okay.
But you change the language even a little bit, and it's like they'd never seen blocks before in their life.
Wow.
So
So are these LLMs just really good at spotting patterns
yeah.
and not actually thinking about the problem?
Yeah. I mean, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Like, it seems like they're really good at this pattern matching. You see this, you spit out that.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to genuine understanding
Yeah.
and flexible reasoning, they really seem to hit a wall.
Okay.
And that's, I think, what's so interesting about this next stage,
Okay.
because they start to look at, well, what about these other models?
Okay.
These LRMs, these large reasoning models.
Okay, so enter the LRMs.
Yeah.
We've got a new AI on the scene.
Yeah.
It's called O1.
Right.
And this is like, we're giving those LLMs a serious brain boost in the reasoning department.
Yeah, this is like giving them a whole upgrade package to their operating system.
Okay.
Okay.
So, could O1 crack the code of Blocks World?
That was the big question,
Yeah.
right? Can it
Yeah.
actually do this?
Ew, the suspense is killing me.
Right. And the results were, I think it's fair to say, intriguing.
Okay.
So on the basic Blocks World,
Yeah.
O1 absolutely crushed it.
Get out of town.
Blew the LLMs out of the water.
So they actually figured it out.
They did.
Oh.
And even on Mystery Blocks World,
Okay.
O1 showed some real promise, which I think is really interesting.
Wow.
Offers this glimmer of hope that maybe this AI is starting to think a little
Yeah.
differently.
Okay, but
Yeah.
there's got to be a but.
There's always a but, right?
Yeah.
Especially
in cutting edge research.
in cutting-edge research.
Yeah.
So, as promising as O1 is, it turns out that even these advanced models have their limits.
Okay.
And that's where things, I think, get really interesting. It turns out O1, even our star pupil here, has a few things to learn.
Okay.
When they made Blocks World harder, more blocks, trickier arrangements,
Right.
O1 started making mistakes.
Really?
Like, it aced the beginner Sudoku, but then it hit a wall with the expert level puzzles.
So what's tripping it up? Is it just like not enough processing power or something?
It's not just raw computing power.
Yeah.
It's the sheer number of possibilities.
Yeah.
As problems get more complex, the potential combinations just explode.
Right.
It's like trying to find a single grain of sand on a beach.
Yeah.
The search space is just astronomically vast.
Okay, so it's complicated, but
Yeah.
what happens when O1 messes up?
Oh, this is good.
Okay.
Remember how those LLMs,
Yeah.
they struggled with Mystery Blocks World?
Yeah.
Because they were all about the pattern matching.
Right.
Not so much the actual understanding.
Right.
Well, it's like O1 picked up a few human-like quirks
Okay.
in its quest for reasoning.
What do you mean?
So instead of just admitting defeat, O1 would come up with these elaborate excuses for why it couldn't solve a problem.
No way, really?
Yeah, like, it's like that student who didn't study for the exam,
Right.
and now they're trying to, like, charm their way into a passing grade.
That's hilarious.
The paper actually mentions one case where O1 decided a task was impossible because a block was in the right place for a split second,
What?
even though it wasn't where it needed to be in the end.
So it's like, hey, I almost had it. Doesn't that count?
Exactly.
Oh, man.
And it really highlights this fundamental challenge with
Right.
AI and reasoning.
Okay.
We take for granted how much of our own intelligence
Lovely.
relies on this, like, common sense.
Yeah.
Understanding the spirit of a task,
Right.
not just the literal instructions.
Totally.
And that's something that even these advanced LRMs are still grappling with.
So it can follow the rules, it can reason to an extent,
Yeah.
but that ability to really, like, grasp the why behind the what,
Yeah, the why.
that's still a work in progress.
Totally. And that's, I think, what's so fascinating about this research.
Yeah.
It's like we're peeking behind the curtain,
Yeah.
seeing how these AI systems are actually thinking.
So where do we go from here?
Right. Because if even these super smart AIs are struggling with stacking blocks,
Yeah, which seems so simple.
what does that mean for the future of AI and planning?
Right, exactly. It's like we're, I don't know, teaching a machine to be like a chef,
Right.
but we're only giving it the cookbook, you know?
Yeah.
It can follow the recipe,
Right.
but can it really, like, improvise and come up with its own dish?
Right. And that brings us to, I think, a really crucial point that this paper highlights, which is that it's not just about building AIs
Yeah.
that are better at planning in isolation. It's about how do we use these AI strengths? Yeah.
In combination with other tools.
So like those classical planners that we've talked about before,
Exactly.
the ones that are already really good at, solving logical problems and stuff.
Exactly. Those classical planners may not be as, I don't know, sexy
Right.
as a cutting-edge LRM or whatever.
Yeah, they don't have the same ring to them.
They don't have the same ring to them.
Yeah.
But they are the workhorses of AI, right?
Yeah.
They get the job done.
Yeah.
And they do it reliably.
Yeah.
So,
So maybe it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's just about
Yeah.
knowing which tool to use,
Absolutely.
And sometimes that means like integrating these AIs into a bigger system
Totally.
instead of them just doing their own thing.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. The researchers even suggest
That for a lot of real world applications,
Uh-huh.
combining AI with these classical planners
right.
might be the most effective way to go.
Like if you're building a house,
Exactly.
you wouldn't only use a hammer.
Exactly. You need a saw, you need a screwdriver,
Right. All these tools work together.
They're all these tools working together.
And I feel like that's kind of what they're saying.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Because each tool has its strengths, it has its limitations,
Really.
and the key is figuring out
Right.
how to use them strategically.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from stacking virtual blocks
I know.
to like the future of AI.
I know, right?
But I want to bring it back to the listener for a second.
Yeah.
Why should they care about AI?
Right.
Trying to like figure out this blocks world.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface,
Yeah.
it seems, maybe a little trivial.
Yeah, like who cares?
Like, who cares? Right.
Yeah.
But planning is at the foundation
Right.
of so many things we do every single day.
Absolutely.
How we navigate traffic, how we manage our finances, even just,
Choosing what's for dinner,
yeah,
which is a struggle in itself sometimes.
it really is.
But so if AI can master these like really complex planning tasks,
Yeah.
imagine the possibilities.
It's huge, right? I mean, it's like we're witnessing
Yeah.
the birth of this whole new era
Totally.
of problem solving.
Where AI can like help us out even more.
Yeah, augment our own abilities.
Yeah, and tackle these challenges in a whole new way.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, we've covered so much today.
We really have.
We talked about LLMs and how they struggle.
Yeah, they're little quirks.
And LRMs, which are really cool,
Mm.
but, still have their own quirks.
Yeah, they're not perfect.
And we even laughed a little bit along the way. So.
We did, which is always good.
But I think that, like, biggest takeaway is that we have to be really thoughtful
Yeah.
about how we develop AI.
Yeah,
We got to, like, recognize its potential,
for sure.
but also its limitations,
Absolutely. It's such an exciting time to be following this field, though.
It really is.
Because who knows what amazing breakthroughs are
Right.
right around the corner.
So, to our listeners out there,
Yeah.
keep those questions coming.
Keep them coming.
Stay curious and never stop exploring the world of AI.
Absolutely. Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.